Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another post-game reaction show. Just got back from Crypto.com Arena, where the Lakers won 140 to 125 to improve to 11-4 at the 15-game mark and 1-0 in the LeBron James era in 2025-26. We have a lot to touch on. This was a good win for the Lakers after looking like a potentially bad loss in the first half, but they dominated Utah in the second half. And we got our first late night session of the season. This is the latest I have gone all season in terms of start. And it was because it was a 7:30 tip, but also there was a lot to cover and analyze post game. So before we get started, you guys know the drill though. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out to everybody in the chat. I also want to shout out, I've been having more people stop me at games, and it's been really cool, or just shouting me out at games. So the late night gang is strong, and I appreciate all the support from everybody. I actually met my muse tonight, the person who runs the Jovan Buha muse account. So that was fun. So let's get into the Lakers' 11th win of the season. Overarching thought, we have to start with LeBron James. Debuts for a record 23rd season. Also passed Reggie Miller for 6th all-time on the three-point list, which for a guy who at one point early in his career, people would go under, I mean, not even early in his career, even like midway through his career, people would still go under screens, to be 6th in all-time three-pointers made, to say nothing of him being the NBA's all-time leading scorer, both in the regular season and playoffs. Just a remarkable career, to say the least, about LeBron. But first impression of LeBron in the 2025-26 season, this guy was missed. Like it worked out despite some concern about how he would impact Luka and Austin and the overall offense and the defense. I think it worked out in game one, 11 points, 3 rebounds, 12 assists, just 1 turnover. And remember, going back to last season, at times LeBron would have some of those performances where he'd have like 5, 6, 7 turnovers. And I thought he really took care of the ball, and that was a welcomed addition to the offense. But I mean, we have to start with the playmaking, because 12 assists in under 30 minutes, that is just a high level passing. And he clearly was more in facilitator mode tonight compared to scoring mode. But I thought it really worked with the way that the Lakers ran their offense. And, I think it was clear that they were largely going to have Luka and Austin be the primary ball handlers, but one way that they leveraged LeBron's incredible, there was a couple ways they leveraged LeBron's incredible all-time passing, was some hit-ahead looks. So, of course, we know about his transition play, both as a passer and a finisher, and there was some of that as well. But sometimes it would be as simple as inbounder gets the ball to Luka, gets the ball to Austin, and they hit LeBron with a cross-court pass. So it sort of catches the defense a little bit off guard. Then LeBron can accelerate, get downhill. That was like that assist he had to Jake LaRavia was on that very action. Was I don't remember who passed him the ball, but Luka or Austin catches the ball on the left side of the floor, hit LeBron on the right side around half court. He attacks downhill, kicks it to Jake LaRavia in the left corner. Simple driving kick basketball. He gets an uncontested 3 because the Jazz defense collapses on LeBron. And one of the big things that I talked about going into LeBron's debut was going to be the advantage creation and the advantage execution from having LeBron in those 4-on-3, 3-on-2 opportunities. We didn't see that as much, but again, having him as that secondary ball handler playmaker is such a luxury, because he would be the primary ball handler and playmaker on at least 25 of the 30 teams, right? Like we could get into certain situations where in Denver it would be Jokic, in Milwaukee Giannis is going to have the ball a certain amount, OKC Shea's going to have the ball a certain amount, but like you go past like the top 5 and you start getting into a situation where LeBron is either the primary guy or the primary ball handler, but having him as like a secondary guy, just picking apart the defense and being able to read where the gaps are in the defense is such a luxury for the Lakers offense. And it is just like, it's really difficult to fathom some of the easy, like certainly easy reads he had, but also advantages that he created himself and then made look easy. And that was one of my big takeaways as well. But so him getting some of those hit ahead early offense looks and then him playing out of the post, like that was, I think a wrinkle that the Lakers really missed within their offense is you saw them start going into mismatch ball a bit more. You saw them posting him up more. You saw some more horns sets, some more 3-man actions with Austin, Luka, and LeBron, or Luka, LeBron, and DeAndre. So there was different ways for LA to get into some of those actions, but I think LeBron's first assist of the game is he just gets the ball on the wing, starts to back down, and DeAndre is trailing the play and just steps into a free throw line jumper. And he had so many situations like that. There was another one, Marcus curls off of a pin down on the weak side. LeBron hits him for a little floater. And then again, a lot of transition early offense stuff. But having LeBron as basically like a better version of the Marcus Smart or Jake LaRavia, and specifically talking like just passing here, but like those were reads that Marcus was making or Jake was making or Gabe was making before he got injured, or even Rui like can try to make or whatever. But having LeBron as that guy is just such the word I keep thinking of is luxury, but it's such an accelerator for LA's offense. And it took a little bit for it to click, for sure, that there was a bit of a learning curve, particularly to start the game. LA got off to a really rough start, was down, they were down 16-6, 5 minutes into the game. I'll touch on the starting lineup in a little bit, but LeBron, once he got his feet wet, once he started to pick, he's picking his spots early, then he started to figure out when he should attack, when he should try to take a jumper, when he should drive and kick, or finding DeAndre Ayton several times in the third and fourth quarter on simple dump off passes and drawing 2 to the ball, or drawing even 3 to the ball, and then creating those opportunities. So the playmaking to me was like the primary thing. We barely scratched the surface of the him as a scorer, which again, people could overlook that part of it, but it's like this is the we don't have to say he's the greatest scorer of all time, but he is the highest scorer of all time, and that counts for something in my book. Just 1 for 4 at the free throw line, it continues to be the one real weakness of LeBron's game up to this point in his career that he's never figured out, is just the free throw line for whatever reason. But hit a couple threes. He had a flare screen for a 3. That was his first basket. Hit another one. And I thought, got downhill, not as frequently early, but then started to, again, kind of pick his spots and find lanes to get to the basket. But I think just in terms of things I'd like to see moving forward from him, I would like to see him be a little bit more aggressive in looking for his shot. He ended up being 6th on the team in field goal attempts. And there are going to be nights like tonight where it doesn't matter as much because of the team that the Lakers are playing. Like the Jazz had a hell of a first half, but they came back down to earth in the second half. JJ said that based on their shot quality and the Lakers' internal analytics and projections, Utah scored 71 points, but was projected to have 55 in the first half. So he said they were kind of overshooting some difficult shots and making some, and we saw that, right? Especially with Keontae George, he went absolutely nuclear in that first half with 23 of his 34. But I would like to see LeBron taking fewer shots than Luka. Okay. Austin. Okay. But then we get to Ayton, Rui, Jake LaRavia. I think he clearly needs to be top 3 in on this team in terms of usage and shot attempts and whatnot. So that's like the next level. But I think really impressive start, to be clear. I hope that's been clear in the way I'm breaking this down right now. But that would be like the next level. And then defensively, there clearly was some I would say a lot of breakdowns early. It got a lot better in the second half, but I think the Lakers switching, there was some botched communication and guys soft switching instead of hard switching. And I think they did, again, a much better job of being physical and being more aggressive with their switching in the second half. But I thought he was certainly a culprit of getting, falling asleep off the ball at times, getting lost off the ball at times. And, they got a couple threes out of that. They got a couple back cuts out of that. And it wasn't solely on him that there were guys in those situations. I rewatched the first half. I haven't been able to watch the second half yet. So I actually saw most of the miscues, and like Lakers just had a lot of communication issues. And this is also a team that JJ noted after the game, that Utah is very similar to Golden State with how many off-ball actions they run, and they run a lot of DHOs, they run a lot of pin downs, they're constantly moving and cutting and screening, and we know like that has been an issue for the Lakers going on multiple years now, but particularly when they played Golden State in the preseason and then again on opening night, like this group can fall asleep off the ball. Their off-ball defense in terms of both decision making and processing and foot speed is a real weakness of this group, and they were able to tighten it up and tidy it up in the second half. But Utah really like torched them in that first half. Like, and again, some of those shots were a little ridiculous, but you got to give Utah credit for their execution. I also thought they really defended the Lakers pick and rolls. Like they had that scouted of the first, like they were taking away Luka's first and second reads a lot of the times. And that's why he had 8 turnovers tonight. But then it went to the next progression, which was often LeBron James, and he made really good things happen. In terms of notable performers, we got to start with Luka Doncic, 37 points, 5 rebounds, 10 assists. I continue to say what Luka's doing is not normal. Like this dude just walks into mid 30s plus near triple doubles on a nightly basis, and that's in line with his season averages. Did struggle with turnovers tonight, had 4 in the first quarter, had 8 overall. And I thought Utah, to the credit of Will Hardy and their staff, I thought they really scouted the first like couple of layers of the Lakers offense. And I think this could be a teaching and learning point, or, reference point for the Lakers in terms of going to the next progressions and the next levels of their offense. But I thought that they were doing a really good job of both sending 2 to the ball, also sending someone to the short roller, and then basically zoning up with the other 3 guys with those 2. But they always had someone really like protecting the rim kind of on the backside of, even if you were able to throw like the lob entry pass into Ayton or Jackson, there's still someone on the backside. So really smart game plan from Utah. And I thought until things went off the rails, basically like late third for them, they had played a heck of a game up to that point. But Luka, 13 of 16 at the free throw line, 2 of 10 on threes, hit a couple big threes, but his 3-point shot continues to be the one real blemish in his game right now. He's just not fallen, and he's taken a lot of them. But 11 for 22 overall, 50% shooting. You will always take that for a high usage superstar. And, I think he also made up for some of his turnovers with the 4 steals. So he did a really good job. That continues to be a real strength of his on the defensive end. And I thought in general, he played pretty good defense. Like they tried to target him a couple times. He got blown by on the perimeter, but this was a fast, young, athletic team that plays with a lot of pace, plays up tempo, and not the best matchup for Luka or the Lakers defensively, but I thought he was largely solid on that end. Then Austin Reeves was certainly a guy who took a step back in terms of like 26 points, 5 rebounds. I think the big step back was 1 assist, 4 turnovers. So he was not as involved. And with the Lakers staggering it, where it went like starters into Luka, led groups into Austin and LeBron. I think, Austin was a little bit more deferential to LeBron as a playmaker, and Austin was far more of a scorer. So still took 11 shots, which was the 3rd most on the team. And when you factor in, he took 12, free throws. He was clearly like the 2nd guy in terms of usage on the team, but a bit of a different role with Austin, more so as a scorer than a playmaker, which he had been doing up to this point overall. But, solid game from him. He had a really tough defensive matchup against Keontae George. The Lakers switched a lot, so they were actually switching Austin off of Keontae a good amount, and going at they went at DeAndre a lot. They went at Rui a bit. They tried to go at Luka as well. Like they were targeting everybody to some degree, but certainly Austin had a tough matchup with Keontae, and Keontae got the better of him on several possessions. Then DeAndre Ayton, 20 points, 14 rebounds, an assist, a steal, one turnover, one block. You like to see. Remember, something with him I'm constantly tracking is the assist to turnover ratio. You like to see that 1-to-1 at a minimum, but 10 for 13 shooting with DeAndre. And I'm going to touch on him in a second because I want to get more into like the next layers of the Lakers offense, but really impressive performance from him. And I thought he was a little shaky defensively to start, but then he, I think, locked in and was a big part of LA's second half success. LeBron, as aforementioned, 11 points, 3 rebounds, 12 assists, 1 steal, 1 turnover. Rui, I thought, had a relatively underwhelming performance, 6 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist, 3 of 8 shooting, 0 for 2 on threes. I thought Lauri Markkanen got the better of him in a lot of those matchups. Again, there was a lot of switching, so he was the primary guy on Lauri, but he got switched off of him a lot. But Rui is a guy who's very susceptible to off-ball back cuts and miscommunication on screens. So I felt, at least with that starting group, in watching it live and then rewatching it, on my rewatch, I thought LeBron and Rui it was often one or both of their faults in a lot of the breakdowns that happened in that first 5 minutes. So that is something to monitor, but I will touch on that a little bit more once we get to the starting group. Jake LaRavia had a really good game, and I will touch on that why in a second, but 16 points, 4 rebounds, played 26 minutes off the bench, and I'm going to touch on the rotation in a second. But Lakers were plus 12 in his minutes, and he led the bench group in minutes and scoring. Marcus Smart, 5 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, 3 fouls. Only played 17 minutes. I'm not quite sure what happened with that, but again, we'll touch on the rotation in a second. Jackson had a really big stretch there. End of third, beginning of fourth, had a couple of really big offensive rebounds and he had that one putback that was a momentum boost where he's flexing at the crowd and going wild like that. That was a couple really big plays from Jackson, and I thought it was solid defensively as he continues to be. So he had a good 15 minutes, and then Gabe, I would say, relatively quiet and underwhelming first half, but then hit a couple of big threes. In the second half, he had the buzzer beater from LeBron to close the third, and then hit another, airballed. The shot selection, like that one, of course, that's a grenade. That's a buzzer beater, right? Like you got to take that one. The 2 to start the fourth, I didn't love from like a process perspective, but he hit one of them, he airballed the other. You take it, you live with it, you live with the results. But I thought defensively they targeted him a bunch, but he held his own to a degree, was being very physical, and I thought got away with a lot of contact. But if you can get away with it, you should get away with it, and he did that defensively. And then no one else played. Lakers went with a 9-man rotation. In terms of takeaway number 1. Stat of the night. How could I forget? Stat of the night, 140 points, season high for the Lakers. So for those who are concerned about how the state of the offense and how it would look with LeBron, I think a season high, 140 points in regulation is a serious number, even in 2025. 12 assists in 29 minutes for LeBron. That is a monster number. And if he had played 35, 36 minutes, he easily gets that to, I think, 15, 16. So really impressive passing performance. And then 31 assists for the game was the 3rd most by the Lakers this season. So I look at the points and I look at the ball movement and the playmaking overall with this group as the most encouraging things to come out of this game. Takeaway number 1, I've already kind of touched on this, but I do want to look at the impact on everybody else, because I thought we saw a couple guys in DeAndre Ayton and Jake LaRavia really benefit from LeBron's insertion into the group. And like DeAndre Ayton was getting, he's said post game, there was several possessions where he wasn't even like, he didn't know that LeBron saw him, and he wasn't even like fully ready for some of those passes. And like that was its own sort of acclimation process. And we saw at times it was a bit clunky in that first quarter in particular, but in that third quarter and fourth quarter, as the Lakers offense exploded, like the LeBron DeAndre connection, I believe he had at least 4 or 5 assists to DeAndre. And we saw with Luka, it clicked rather quickly as well. With Austin, it was a little bit more of a process. I think DeAndre being a guy who prefers pocket passes more than lobs, though LeBron did get him with the lob as well. Like that is a bit of an adjustment period where LeBron is used to making those pocket passes at a very high frequency and at a high level. So there's probably a little bit of a natural synergy there, but I thought LeBron created a bunch of easy looks for DeAndre, and it was fewer jumpers for DeAndre. He did have a couple, but a lot of just dunks and layups around the basket, which is great based on how good of a finisher he is. And then Jake LaRavia, I thought LeBron really unlocked some of his game in transition, but then also some of the driving kicks for the corner shots. And I think Jake started to look more like himself from a couple weeks ago when he was playing his best basketball offensively. And it wasn't just the shots going in, but it was a certain like confidence and rhythm and flow and just letting it fly, where he can be a guy, it seems like when he gets out of a rhythm, he is a team first guy and he's not going to force shots. So I feel like when he isn't as confident, he'll start to pass up looks, and that's not the way that the supporting cast needs to play, right? Like I think there needs to be a balance, right? Like Marcus Smart, Gabe Vincent, they could they could tilt the seesaw a little bit too much in the irrational confidence direction, but I think Jake LaRavia is such a good shooter, and up to this point been the second best shooter in the rotation. Like you want to see him take some more of those shots. So I think the big thing with adding LeBron in is the Lakers have run a steady diet of pick and roll, and it'll often even be like a different, maybe it's a Chicago action, maybe it's a stack action, maybe it's a Horns action. And then if that doesn't work, if that doesn't lend itself to a look, they will often end a possession with some sort of high pick and roll with Luka with the ball or Austin with the ball, right? And then it's go cook the big man or go create some sort of advantage. And there was a lot of that tonight, to be clear. So I'm not saying that changed or that should change, but they now have this entirely other option to their offense where you can do that with LeBron if you want to, but you can also then find ways to draw a mismatch and get him in the post, and then the opponent has to double out of that. And then LeBron is such a great passer that's where you get the weak side cuts, you get the weak side, swing passes or skip passes to the corner, to the weak side wing. So I just think this really, again, like we could theorize about what we thought it would look like, but actually seeing it in principle and seeing, I think, a pretty quick progression, like even between the first half and the second half, I thought there was a lot of new wrinkles within LA's offense. Again, I have to finish my rewatch and rewatch the second half, but it felt like even just during intermission, whatever JJ said, or however LeBron and Luka and Austin were kind of calibrating the situation, it just took off to a different level in that second half. So I think we're getting real close to top 3 level offense here, and need a larger sample size. This was one game, one data point, but I think that's the way this Lakers offense is trending. Takeaway number 2 is the starting lineup. So to little surprise, Rui Hachmira was the 5th starter. If you guys had been listening, I predicted that going into camp. Then once there was the LeBron setback, there's a little less clarity, but anytime I've talked about it, just in an NBA TV interview today, they asked me what my prediction was for the starting group. I said Rui. Like that had been what I've been hearing, that had just been reading the tea leaves, like the way this was trending. So a little surprised that it was Rui. JJ said pregame that this was the group he had anticipated being the starting group going into the training camp, going into the preseason. One of my favorite things is tweeting out the starting group. It's one of my pregame routines, and it's fair to say the fan base crashed out, at least on X, about this starting lineup, and I understand it because I did not agree with it. Like I've been on record, I've been pro Marcus starting since the summer. I made a podcast episode about it. I did social videos about it. I've been singing the gospel of Marcus should be the fifth guy. He balances the other four players much better. And, so early returns with the starting group were not very promising. I will acknowledge that. And I think you have to acknowledge, like, this was not the best matchup for LA's defense in the sense of you have a young, athletic, big team that shoots a lot of threes and moves very well off the ball. There are not many teams that check that number of boxes that will test the Lakers in this way. That this was a unique matchup to some degree, right? Like, there are not many teams that play like Golden State and Utah. Now, teams that do play that way, I think, have a certain advantage against LA's defense. But in terms of, so starting group starts down 16-6, then Marcus comes in for LeBron, and then they are +3. I did some quick math going through the play-by-play. They were -10, 5 minutes, +3, 2 minutes, and then I believe they were +1 in the 5 minutes in the third quarter. So overall, they played 12 minutes and they were -6 as a group against, if we're being honest, like a lottery level team. Like, I think Utah's had an impressive start to the season, and they are better than I think people assumed. Like, many people had them as the worst team in the West, and I think they're better than Sacramento and New Orleans and maybe even the Clippers and Grizzlies. Like, we'll see how the season progresses. Probably not. They're probably the third best team in the West. But like, the Lakers defense got shredded, and I do like LeBron had some good moments defensively, particularly as a playmaker. He had a steal, he had a couple of nice deflections, and he is capable of making those pick six reads where, not necessarily even for himself, but then it'll be someone else leaks in transition, and then he hits them, and Lakers get an easy basket, which I believe his steal led to, might have been an Austin transition basket, but I just think looking at that group, and especially with how much the Lakers switch, you're going to have guys like, on the one hand, you can look at it a couple ways, right? Like, you can look at it as, if you're switching, that negates having the better perimeter defender out there, which is part of the reason why I think Vando has been squeezed from the rotation. But on the other hand, I think switching as much as the Lakers do, then that you're going to have guys at different spots on the floor, right? Like, you're going to have cross matchups. You're going to have guys in different scenarios. So then I think it actually matters more, how good of a team defender are you? How good are you at defending other situations? And I think just seeing Marcus only got a few minutes with the starters. He did check in for Rui for a couple minutes midway through the third. Rui was the first sub. JJ made that adjustment. But I just think it was a night and like, he comes in, he immediately gets a deflection, then gets like another near steal that they called a foul that I thought was a pretty weak foul call. Like, he's pressuring the ball. Yes, Keontae George got him a little bit, but he got everybody tonight. And I just thought there was a clear difference in like the defensive impact between Rui and Marcus. And of course, we know Marcus is a better defender, but like, based on how lifeless the Lakers starting group was defensively for most of its tenure together tonight, I just think it like, there's nothing I saw tonight that changed my opinion about the starting group. If anything, I felt there was just further confirmation that I don't think the starting group is going to work against good offenses. I think good offenses, if you are like a league average defense and a good offense, I think you're probably going to win the minutes against the starting group, which projects as an elite offense, but a bad defense. So I think, like, again, one reference point, I don't want to overreact to one game, but I do think like we've started to see how these pieces work together. And I think most of my concerns with this starting group were on display for their tenure against Utah starting group. And, the offense certainly progressively, like it got better progressively throughout the game, but that also often featured bench players entering and there being a little bit more of a two-way balance. So I just think something to monitor. I asked JJ about it after the game of just what his impressions were with the starting group and like this being the unit that he had anticipated for so long and like finally seeing it, like just what did he think? And to be honest, I don't think he liked my question. I think I tried to remove any bias or like perspective from the question, but I feel like he took it, maybe he knows, I don't know, maybe he listens to Buha's block. Maybe he's tuned in right now. But maybe he knows like some of the pushback against the starting group or my at least pushback against the starting group. And he kind of knew where I was going with the question, even though I didn't go there with it. But so I felt he got a little defensive if you watch his press conference and I had the final question, but he did ultimately say like, there were some really good stretches. There were some really bad stretches. And he's not opposed to like eventually changing the group. So I think that's the way this probably has to trend. And, they're going to get the rematch against Utah. So we'll see what that looks like on Sunday. They'll have 3 days of practice leading into that. But, it's a bit of an easy stretch here for LA to kind of pad the net rating or the plus minus with the starters. I just think for this group to be a serious contender, you need a better fit defender in the starting group. And then third and final takeaway before we get into the Q&A here, just want to briefly touch on the rotation. So one thing I had noted coming off of yesterday's practice was actually like thinking through the rotation and who's going to play, how much are they going to play, and looking at like last season, looking at this season, looking at JJ's rotation tendencies. I said yesterday, I thought it was probably going to be a 9-man rotation and that they were even going to struggle to fully play 9 guys. Now it did, they got to the 9 relatively easily. And the reason was that there were some rotation surprises, I would say, with the minutes. So DeAndre Ayton played, we'll start with him, played 30, which is about, and this is going to be out of 45, we'll say, minutes per player because the last 3 minutes of the game were pure garbage time. Actually, technically, the last 4 minutes of the game were garbage time based on Adu going in, Dalton, Bronny, eventually Maxey, etc. But so Ayton plays 30 minutes, technically 29, not including a minute of garbage time. It's a little lower than I anticipated, but he was very efficient and effective in his minutes. So that was a little bit lower than I thought. Jackson did play really well. And I would assume like for the starters, probably you add that extra 3 or 4 minutes and that gets you to a more like they probably close with the starting group, or maybe it's between Rui and Marcus or Rui. I mean, Jake was playing a really good game. So maybe Jake gets the close, but we'll never know, but just kind of extrapolating it out. So 30, but we'll say 29 for DeAndre, 26 for Rui. So Rui went from 34 without LeBron to 26. And I had said I expected him to be in that 30-ish minute range, especially if he started. And, he ended up being 26. So maybe with the closing 3 or 4 minutes, he gets to 29 or 30, but that was a little bit lower than I anticipated. LeBron was at 30, which was actually higher than I anticipated based on him sort of being on a minutes restriction. But JJ said he could have gone 35 if he needed him to. So he will work his way up. I would not be surprised if the Utah game is closer in Utah. LeBron's up to 34, 35. Then you had Austin right there at about 33. So he could have been at 36, 37, full strength. Luka at 34, probably 37, 38. So Austin, Luka, and to a lesser extent, LeBron were kind of in the range I expected. Rui and Ayton a little bit lower. Then we get to Marcus Smart at just 17 minutes. So up to this point, the Lakers had been playing that sixth player in the mid to high 20s of whoever was like the sixth man of the night. And that actually ended up being Jake LaRavia tonight. So maybe it's a little bit more of a rotation, or maybe Marcus coming off of the illness that he just had forced him to, just held him out. Cause like he didn't struggle. I mean, he had 3 fouls, but wouldn't classify that as really like struggling with foul trouble. So Marcus and Rui both, I thought those guys would be like 30, 28 minutes each. It was 26 and 17. Like, so because both guys were lower though, then you had a little bit more egalitarian approach to the rest of the rotation where Jackson gets up to 15, which is a little bit more than I thought. I thought like 12 to 14, he'd probably be in that range. Jake was at 26, which was definitely more than I thought. I thought he'd be closer down at like 18 to 20. And then Gabe was at 16, which is kind of in line. I think I said 15 for him. And I know I know people are ready to kick Gabe to the sun, but I've been saying tonight he was technically the 8th man. That's the way I've been penciling him in. I think Gabe is going to play at least 12 minutes, if not in that 15 to 16 range. But the rotation went largely as expected. I will note, I liked some of the bench lineups. I liked like first quarter, they went Hayes, Luka, Rui, Jake, Marcus. I really like that. I like the Hayes and Luka combination. I've talked about that before. Luka is the best lob passer on the team. And I think that unlocks, like that supercharges Jackson to a degree. Then you're spacing the floor with Rui, Jake, and Marcus. You have some secondary ball handling and playmaking with Marcus and Jake. And then you're just that's a really big lineup. Like, outside of Marcus, everybody is 6'7" and above. And Marcus is obviously a big dude if you're like technically playing him at point guard defensively. The one I did not like as much in this one was okay, but it was Ayton, LeBron, Jake, Gabe, Austin. That was kind of in line. Let me take that back. I actually liked that one. The one I didn't like was then they went to a 3-guard lineup. So the Ayton, LeBron, Austin, that's a pairing that, or a trio I like. Austin and LeBron were clearly paired up a lot with the second unit groups. And it's like, good luck, bench units, go guard Austin and LeBron. But then when you have Ayton in there, like that's where we saw the LeBron Ayton 2-man game start to develop. Also, Jake got out in transition. What I didn't like about this, now I'm remembering, I don't like Gabe and Austin together. I think that is, if we're looking at the rotation, like technically Austin is bigger than Marcus, but Marcus plays like he's got a good 30 pounds on Austin, and he's 6'3", but he plays more like 6'6". So I would say like in actuality, Austin and Gabe are probably the two like smallest players in the rotation, if that makes sense, like physically, in terms of like physically imposing. And I don't love that combination playing together. I like Gabe more so in Luka lineups where it's like just a bunch of giant players and then Gabe's like the one small guy. But I don't love Gabe and Austin together. That was like my one nitpick with that lineup. And then they went to a 3-guard lineup where it was Marcus, Gabe, and Austin. And then I was like, all right, we're getting a little too small here. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. Appreciate you guys I had a lot to touch on, had a lot to break down. Let's get into it here. Christian Wetzel took the half-court shot and airballed. LOL, so fun. Shout out to Christian here. That's awesome. I remember that. So I did not know that was you. I did not know you were part of the late night gang, but shout out to Christian. And I got to find that clip now on X. LP, thank you for the super chat. I have a feeling we can go 8-2 over the next 10. 100% agree. Lakers have, I said, I think it was after the Milwaukee game, someone asked me, like, looking at the next 10, and I said they could potentially go on like an 11-game winning streak here at Utah. I think now that we've seen it, like it is hard to beat the same team twice in a row. And I think the Lakers will be more prepared, but going back multiple years, but even going back to last year's team, this group, for whatever reason, doesn't tend to perform well after having a massive a long break. Like even going into opening night, remember they had they played Friday, then they didn't play again until Tuesday. And you could go to like game 1 of the playoffs. Like there were several coming out of the All-Star break last year. Like there's several times where for whatever reason, this group kind of is a little lethargic coming out of multi-day breaks. So that would be my one concern going into the Utah game, is like beating the same team twice. They did have some success, obviously, in the first half against you. You're on the road, and you're coming off this multi-day absence. So I actually think looking at this upcoming stretch of, after the Utah game, they have 4 straight home games. I think that the at Utah game, and not just because it's a road game, but because I think their play style can test the Lakers defense in a multitude of ways. This one actually, I think, is like sneakily like the toughest game, which like going into the season, I would not have said at Utah is going to be tougher than against the Clippers or the Mavericks or even necessarily the Suns. But, and look, Phoenix is playing really well, so that might actually be the toughest game. But I think at Utah is having the multi-day break, like, you know, that one's going to, I think, test the Lakers mentally. But then home versus the Clippers, who can't beat anybody right now. Home versus Dallas, we know what that's going to mean for Luka, even with Nico gone. Home versus the Pelicans again. Home versus the Suns. Lakers could easily rattle off the next 5. Then they go out on a road trip that I think is going to be a little tricky. At Toronto, they're playing really well. At Boston, we know both sides are going to be up for that matchup. At Philly, they've had a good start to the season. At Utah again, that's an insane back-to-back going, or not back-to-back. Oh, sorry, excuse me. I misspoke because this actually, that road trip leads into the NBA Cup. So depending on where LA is at in terms of the NBA Cup, that'll determine where their next couple games are. So I misspoke there. So they got a 3-game road trip, and then potentially, depending on, it looks like they're going to win Group B. And so they should have that quarterfinal game at home. And then potentially the semifinal game would be likely, I think, at OKC. That's the most likely outcome here. Because OKC is probably going to be the 1 seed, of course. And then they would potentially go to Vegas. But there is a scenario in which they go to Vegas and then directly come out of it to Utah, LA, Phoenix, LA being at the Clippers. So there's like a stretch. There's a scenario here, I guess, in which they go 6 of the next 7, or 7 of the next 8, like after that Phoenix game could be on the road. But if we just take the games at face value that they currently have, at Utah, home Clippers, home Dallas, home New Orleans, home Phoenix, at Toronto, at Boston, at Philly, you got the 2 cup games at minimum, but we'll put that aside. At Utah, at Clippers, I mean, they're going to be favored in at least 8 of those 10. So yeah, I mean, I think 8-2 is like very realistic. Like they got to take care of business, right? Like they can't have an Atlanta game. They probably can't even have a Charlotte game, but 8-2 is very in play here. The Wannabe GMs podcast. Thank you for the super chat. Thoughts on Okoro? He seems like the perfect fit for the 5th starter, elite defender, average/above average shooter, and young. What would a trade look like? Let me pull up his contract and let me pull up his numbers this season. I do like Isaac Okoro. In my gut reaction to this is I view him more as a good bench wing and not a starter. So looking at it, shooting 36% on threes this season, was 37% last year, 39% the year before. So basically since his second season, he's been 35, 36, 39, 37, 36. His career average is 35. So he's about an average shooter, which I think it's like that's fine. You can't have everything, right? So I would, of course, take an average shooter rather than a below average shooter or a bad shooter. So him being average, especially like the looks he would get with the Lakers, would obviously be at a level that I don't think he ever got in Cleveland and has not gotten in Chicago. I think a couple of things with him, going through his numbers quickly, he's like an average to below average rebounder for a wing, has developed a bit as a playmaker, doesn't get to the free throw line much, is a relatively low 3-point shooter volume wise. Like I would say below average for a high playing wing, but I certainly got like worse players you could try to acquire than Okoro. And then looking at his contract, he's making 11 this year, so it does line up nicely with Gabe and or Maxi, or most likely and then 11.8 next season. So yeah, I mean, if the one issue here, I guess, is the Bulls. The Bulls are playing well. They just had a big win in Denver. And right now he's only 8th in the team So he's a full-time starter, but he's 8th on the team in minutes, and often they'll go to some sort of like, they'll play Herder or DeSumo at the 3 technically, or they'll go to some 3-guard lineups. Or I mean, they just added. This is factoring in Kobe White's return, so I guess technically he's 7th on the team in minutes per game. But I just wonder if the Bulls would even be open to trading him, and I don't know if I don't think he's a negative contract in the sense of, I don't know if you just offered Gabe and like a second, if that gets them to be like, well, let's accept a worse player just to get off of his like 12 million next year. I think it's like a fine contract for him. So I just have some hesitance as to like whether the Bulls would do this, but my like ideal role for him would probably be 7th, 8th man. But if he's your 5th starter, he is more of a two-way player than the Lakers' current options. So I'm on board with it, depending on the price. I have a hard time seeing Chicago do it. Bri, thank you for the super chat. Warriors lose, Lakers win. What a good night. A good night indeed for the Lakers. They are 4th in the West right now, half game above San Antonio, and a half game back of Houston. So right there in the mix behind, and they got a nearly 1 point boost on their point differential. So that is encouraging as well. Good night for the Lakers. Great night, I would say. Braden, hey Brate, great Jackson game. Hopefully JJ makes the smart over Rui starting adjustment soon. Yeah, I would assume, especially coming off of a win, that he's not going to make it. But maybe if they lose in Utah, that is, or maybe even if they're winning, like I think it's going to have to come after a loss. You rarely change your starting group after a win, unless it's like if the Lakers are on a 2-game win streak. If it had been, like when you get a LeBron back, of course you change the starting group, but for the most part, you're not swapping in like the 5th starter for a different 5th starter if you're on a winning streak. So if the Lakers reel off 6-7 wins in a row, it's like probably not going to happen. But I think the caveat would be if the lineup data is bad and we have a larger sample and it's been like 5-6 games and the starting group continues to lose the minutes or like tread water, like you want your this is why I disagree with the notion that starting groups like don't matter. Like it's supposed to be your best players going up against the best players against the other team, or from the other team rather. And then most like championship level starting groups are like have like a +8 net rating, +7 net rating. And like the really good ones, like the Denvers and the OKCs, I don't know what theirs are off the top of my head, but going back like the last couple of years, those groups are often double-digit positive. So for me, even if this group ends up netting out at like a +3 or even like a +5, that's rather weak compared to some of the units they're going to be playing against. And if you look at how dominant OKC, Denver, and Houston have been with their starting groups and in general, the Lakers currently do not like project well against that caliber of opponent. And I think it has to start with the starting group and setting a certain tone. So I'm not going to pretend to know what JJ is going to do, but I think that the one, barring them going like a losing streak or having a rough stretch, which I don't think is going to happen for quite some time, if it even does happen, again this season, I think it's probably going to have to take a larger sample size of just looking at the starters and being like, hey, this lineup isn't really cutting it. We need to make a change. But even then, again, it probably has to come off of a loss. So at some point here, maybe they have a loss that triggers that from JJ. But otherwise, I think it's probably going to be status quo. And yes, Jackson had a really, really good game. And Chrissy, 13. I think trading for Derek Jones gets easier now. If he's healthy and the Clippers keep losing, feels like we could get him with matching salary plus a second. So he's supposed to be back around New Year's. So I think like the one thing with the Clippers is they don't own their own pick, which is frightening because it's going to OKC. So, I mean, OKC could be adding, depending on how the picks break out, they could be adding 3 or 4 first round picks. And like, they're obviously not going to, they'll probably trade their way out of that. But I mean, what if OKC gets like a top 5? It's crazy. But potentially, yes, with Derek Jones, like, I mean, you don't want to trade for a guy. You want to have like a little bit of a sample size, at least in my opinion, of him being back and like effective, right? I think a mistake would be just blindly trading for a guy who's either injured or fresh off of the injury. Again, it depends on if it just costs Gabe in a second or something, sure, I would probably take the risk, relatively blindly. But assuming it's going to cost something of substance, I would want to have some confidence and some assurance that he is still as effective as he was to start the season. I just don't see the Clippers based on there's really no incentive for them to tank unless they got their pick back from OKC, which is not going to happen. So if anything, I see the Clippers going more in the desperate mode and trying to get a Ja Morant or an AD or maybe even the next tier of guy that's available and trying to put the holes in the boat out rather than just jumping off of the boat. So I'm still rather skeptical that I think at a minimum, the three teams that it's going to be really difficult to find a trade for are Boston, the Clippers, and the Mavericks. To a lesser extent, I've referenced Portland and Sacramento. Probably throw San Antonio, all the Lakers, Golden State, all the Lakers rivals of the past 25 years. And then of course, Boston and the Clippers, I think goes beyond that just because of the geography for the Clippers and then the Lakers Celtics history. I think there are a legit 6 to 7 teams that probably would not want to do business with the Lakers or would ask for more than market value for the player, which I think has been an issue the Lakers have ran into. Some people have called it the Lakers tax or whatever, but so I'm still skeptical to be clear on Derek Jones being realistic. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I still I can't really see the Clippers being let's help the Lakers. I don't think that's how it works. Light him up. Thank you for the super chat. I feel like this year Adu will end up taking Vando's minutes as a defensive and offensive threat. Vando's limited minutes lately and not playing tonight makes me think he's going to be on the trade block. Thoughts? So I'm glad you brought this up because I didn't really, I hit on the rotation, but I didn't hit on who didn't play, right? So no Vando, no Dalton, no Maxey, no Adu. Dalton and Adu and Maxey all play in garbage time, but they did not play in the competitive and serious portion of the game. So LA goes with the 9-man rotation, and the most notable guy who squeezed is Vando. I've been warning the Vando hive, or I don't know what we want to call the segment that is heavily on the I'm still getting Vando should start, and I'm like, Vando's not even going to play. It's a big jump. That's I've gotten several questions over the last few weeks of Vando should be the 5th starter. Vando should be playing more, and I just I think this is warranted to a degree based on his performance. I wouldn't go so far as to say he's unplayable or shouldn't be playing at all, but I do think based on performance, he probably should be the 10th man and should be more in an 8 to 12 minute 1 to 2 shift a night role. But JJ clearly disagrees. Again, the Lakers were just without 4 of their top 8 guys, at least based on JJ's hierarchy. And Vando still only played 8 minutes. And again, I've made this point before, so I don't want to keep belaboring it, but I just think Vando's limitations really go against JJ's sensibilities. And this isn't to say he's never going to play again, but I think the 9 guys who played tonight are firmly ahead of him in the rotation, and nothing barring one of those guys getting injured or being in foul trouble, I don't really see Vando ascending above them currently. Now, the issue here at the trade block is I've talked about this before, but everyone I've talked to outside of the Lakers views Vando as a negative contract, and the type of contract that you'd probably have to, especially with the Lakers' relatively limited draft capital of 1 first-round pick, 1 second-round pick, multiple pick swaps, but those are kind of even iffy depending on who you are, because that's a bet against the Lakers, which teams are not the Lakers are one of the best set up teams for the future with Luka and Austin and their cap flexibility. Teams are not really valuing that, as much as they might value a Sacramento Kings, draft swap or pick swap, excuse me. So I think Vando might be in a situation where you have to attach a first round pick just to get off of Vando to like that gets you to neutral. And then it's like, okay, well, if you're getting something of substance, it's like Vando, a first and a second, Vando, Adu and a first, Vando, Dalton and a first. Like you're probably attaching a first or maybe a protected first to get him to neutral. And then you're attaching something on top of it. I think I do not like, I think most people view him as a currently would be a minimum player if he hit the market and as a negative trade value. And I think the Lakers not playing him does not help because the Lakers, as I've said before, have often been more optimistic and bullish on Vando compared to how other people view him. And the fact that it seems like they're finally getting to the point where they're like, we're not sure that this guy's a rotation player on our team. I think that's not a great sign for his trade value. So I do think it's going to be a pretty difficult. It's not impossible. The number's low enough that you can get off of it. So it's not like this albatross contract of potentially an AD, depending on his health, but like a Paul George or like back in the day, like the John Wall contract or whatever. It's not to that level because it's not 50 million. It's not 60 million, but 11. But you know, a guy who looks like a minimum player for even 11, 12 million, you are like knowingly with 2 more years left after this year, you're knowingly like taking away $10 million from your cap sheet or, you know, 8, depending on the vet minimum hold. So like, it's just not an appealing thing for people to take on. If he was expiring, totally different conversation. And, you know, I think would be in like the Gabe Kleba mix of value. 2 more years at that salary. I do not think people are going to want to take that on. Glenn, thank you for the super chat. Jovan, love your insider knowledge. Is Vando in the doghouse? We got the Vando chats here. Yeah, I mean, I don't even think he did anything wrong per se. Like, I just think the offense has been what it's been. There's not been, like, he's not improved as a shooter. He's not improved as a finisher. He's actually gotten worse as a finisher. And the talk in training camp about him being a better corner 3-point shooter has not materialized. It is still a glaring weakness in his game, both in him like having the confidence to take it, and then probably even like taking it sometimes when it's like a momentum killer. Because how many times has he airballed the 3 this season? Like I would assume like at least 30% of his misses have been airballs this season. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it is like 1 out of every 3 or so he is airballing, and I just think like that has been its own issue for him to overcome. That again, I think has gotten worse. Like statistically, he has been worse offensively this year than he was last year, and last year he was worse than he was the year before. So I've referenced this before, but we're on a dissension here with Vando's offensive game, and it was already bad. So now it's going lower, and then I also think defensively, the way that the Lakers are deploying him, like I even think his just actual on ball impact has not been quite to the level of previous years. But with how much the Lakers switch, that really negates the, like, you want to put Vando on a player and run a more conservative or more typical pick and roll coverage or screening coverage. And instead the Lakers are like, even tonight, they're switching everything where like Ayton was switching onto Markkanen a lot, and they're switching 1 through 5 in most regards. So I just think with both him regressing as an offensive player, which I didn't even think was possible, but somehow is, and him also not being quite the same level of defender, and the Lakers defensive system not setting him up for success, it just feels like, it more so just feels like a really bad fit right now of, maybe there is a team that identifies him as, hey, if we could get him for this low price or whatever, we could unlock him or use him in a better way. But he is functionally a 5 on offense. And I think with how the Lakers are currently playing offensively, there's never really a justification to play him above Ayton or Hayes. Both guys are better currently. Both guys are playing better offensively. As I mentioned yesterday, both guys are shooting almost 20% better at the rim. And like, so those guys are like elite finishers compared to a below average finisher. It's just really tough to justify changing their offense drastically to try to play him. So yeah, I mean, I don't even know if it's the doghouse. I just think, I don't even know if he's on the property right now. Right. Like I don't know. Elon or Alon, thank you for the super chat. Keep up the great work, Jovan. Love from Austria. Shout out to Austria and shout out to, I'll say Alon. I hope I didn't mispronounce that too poorly. Young Claire, thank you for the super chat. LeBron's connection with Jake and DA was on point. Yes. And both guys, like, you know, to be clear, like DA obviously has had good chemistry with Luka. He's had good chemistry with Austin. Like DA is just a good player. He's a good roller. He's a good screener. He's a good short roll player. So I think like it was more so a combination of like, they look like they had been playing together for weeks when they had not. And then also some of LeBron finding him on some of those like cuts where, again, even Ayton was like, I was not expecting this. That to me was like the next level of it. It looked like a pairing that had been together for a while when it was their first game together. Like, you know, even they had one practice, right? And that was LeBron's first practice. So that's, yeah. And then with Jake, like Jake is I think a really like one thing with Jake is I talked about this over the summer. He's a really good relocator and he's really smart with like the subtleties of the game where ideally, like when the on-ball player is doing something, the other four guys are watching and processing and making decisions and making reads off of the combination of what the ball handler is doing and what the defense is doing and what the scouting report is and what the tendencies and films say and like reading and reacting, right? And I think that's one thing that Jake is really good at is even as a small thing as like relocating from like the edge of the corner three deeper into the corner, like that subtle thing of moving 2 or 3 feet over all of a sudden creates a passing lane that some guys just don't think that way. They don't process that way and they don't relocate, or they'll relocate a step late. And that's when you see a Luka or LeBron or Austin try to hit them in the corner, but they laser the ball and it goes out of bounds or something, or it gets fumbled, or all of a sudden they fumble and recover, but then now the defense has closed out to them. So I think Jake is really smart with his off-ball movement and relocation and reading what the ball handler is going to do. And I think playing with LeBron, who can make every pass in the book, make every read from every angle, that's just a natural pairing right there. To the LeBron orchestrating in the fourth is best offense so far. Thank you for the super chat. Yeah, I mean, that second half was, I really don't know what you do with the Lakers offense, because especially when they have the three of them together, it's just like there's so much passing on the floor that and then having Ayton as not only a roller, but also Ayton got cross-matched a lot with Utah's defenders, and he was able to, like, I thought the Lakers did a really good job of attacking the offensive glass tonight. They had 11 offensive rebounds compared to Utah's 8. Utah, I believe, had entered the game as the second best rebounding team and a top 5 offensive rebounding team in the league. So LA out-rebounded them. They had more offensive rebounds than them. They had more second chance points, 24-15 for the Lakers. So, I mean, DeAndre deserves a big shout out there with 4 offensive rebounds. Jackson also had a couple. Rui had a couple. So I thought LA did a good job of, when there were cross matches, taking advantage of that with some deep seals, but also, and that either leading to baskets or fouls, or also just purely offensive rebounds. And yeah, I mean, the second half offense, which LeBron, I believe, had 5 assists or 6 assists in like 5 minutes. It was something crazy like that. That was the best. And they were getting out in transition. They were attacking with cuts and driving kicks, and he was just maestroing everything. So, I mean, they've had other, I don't want to like, you know, just going through it quickly. They've had stretches of like the 2 Minnesota wins, the parts of the second half of the Memphis win, Miami, San Antonio was not the prettiest. The Milwaukee game, like, you know, there's been some stretches where the offense has looked really good and the ball movement and player movement has been elite, but definitely tonight I thought was like the was the crescendo of what the Lakers have been building toward. Light them up. Thank you for the super chat. Once again, Lakers coming out strong in the third and changed the game. Looks like a major problem from last year might be fixed. Really good call out there. Really good point. I'm going to pull it up where the Lakers are at currently in terms of third quarter net rating, because that was obviously something that they were one of the worst teams in that last season. If we look at it in terms of third quarter net rating, I think last time I checked, they were middle of the pack. Right now they're 10th, and that includes tonight. So plus 3.8 in the third. Just out of curiosity, they've had some pretty bad first quarters, and once again, we're down in the first quarter, and this is where I get back to the starting thing. They are currently 19th in first quarter net rating, -6, which is not good. Let's see, second quarter. We'll just go through all the quarters just for fun. They are second in second quarter net rating, plus 4.5. I mean, sorry, not second, 12th, plus 4.5. And then fourth quarter should be good too, because they have a lot of clutch wins. Fourth quarter, they're 6th, plus 8. So it's actually just been the first quarter that's been the Lakers' biggest issue. The third quarter has been their second worst quarter, but they're positive in all three quarters outside of the first. So again, they got to figure out the slow starts. That's been a real issue, but they've at 11-4, there's not much to complain about. Shabugan, thank you for the super chat. You could just amend "I don't like Gabe and Austin" together to "I don't like Gabe," and it would be correct. I get it. I thought he did hit a couple of big shots that the Lakers still probably win this game convincingly without those shots, but they were big momentum shots, like the buzzer beater to close the third quarter, got them up by 11. You got the crowd, like the crowd was already into it, but like you got the crowd to a different level decibel wise. And then the other shot early in the fourth. Yeah. I mean, I think if I'm on the coaching staff or in the film room and I'm trying to make adjustments, I'm probably slicing Gabe's minutes from 16 to like 12-ish and then adding more minutes to Marcus. And I think Jake's probably going to play a little bit less. And then those minutes go to Marcus. And then the starting group is pretty much in line. Again, maybe a little bit less for Ayton and Rui, but LeBron's going to play more. So you got to relocate them or, reallocate the minutes somewhere, reallocate. But yeah, I mean, I thought like maybe a little less Jackson, not by much, like talking like a minute or two, give that to DeAndre. And then Rui and Marcus a little bit more, Jake, Gabe, and Jackson a little bit less. But the bench played well tonight. They were all double-digit plus-minus. Everyone was actually double-digit plus-minus except for LeBron, but he was tied to the starting, like he was part of the starting group. So if you look at the -6 and 12, and he played just under 30 minutes, if you look at the 18 minutes LeBron was not with the starters, or roughly 18, he was actually +7. So it was the starting group that, I mean, it tanked all the starters plus minuses to a degree, but with LeBron in particular, like he was much better not in the starting group. Mac Roblox 94, thank you for the super chat. Tell the Lakers staff to start Marcus Smart, not Rui. LeBron on track to win assist leader for the season. Look, man, I've made my case. I've talked to the powers that be, and it's not in my control here. But I've shared it with some people that I think there's a clear starting group. But yeah, I mean, LeBron, I mean, maybe LeBron, like, we were talking about what is LeBron going to look like, and is he going to be off the ball and this and that. And it's like, hey, maybe he just averages 10 to 15 assists every night. What does it matter, bruh? Thank you for the super chat. Surprised Rui is put back on the wing and immediately gets fried and dies on every screen. There's no way we go into year 3 thinking this is going to work. We're so close to being a contender. He has to go. I would say, so sometimes you have to go, like, okay, let's go back to the beginning of last year. I think we all were or I'm going to speak for myself. I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but I was skeptical of last year's starting group working, and my ideal group was Max Christie over D'Angelo Russell, but I didn't think it was realistic. And as we saw, Max, my understanding was that they did want it to trend that way eventually, but Max got off to such a bad start that they eventually went to Cam Reddish, then Dalton Connect, and then they worked their way back to Max Christie. But 8 games into that season, I believe it was around the 8-game mark that D'Lo got benched. It was very clear you could not start D'Lo. That group was not good enough together on either end of the floor, but particularly defensively. I wonder if JJ, I think there was an element of politics with that, of just coming off of the conference finals run and then the next season, and clearly Darvin losing the locker room and losing, I think specifically Rui, Austin, and D'Lo to a degree, because he benched all those guys when they clearly should not have been benched and were at the time thought to be like longer term parts of the Lakers' future. I think there was an element of like coming in and hey, let's start like our best 5 players on paper, our best 5 offensive players, and go from there. And then eventually they had to make that tweak. I wonder if it's a similar thing here where it's just like, shared it before. I mean, Rui's publicly said it, but I've also heard it behind the scenes. I'm not the only one who's reported this either, but like Rui wants to start, prefers to start, believes he's a starter. He's in a contract year, and the data and the splits also back up like Rui's better as a starter. So maybe he just needs a few games under his belt with some film and some data. And in 4 or 5 games, he could go back to Rui individually or like in a film room setting and just be like, hey, this is the data with the starting group. This is the film. This is where we're struggling defensively. We need to make a change. Marcus, it's your time to shine. It's your time to start. So I think that's like probably the best case scenario here. I think the worst case scenario is actually the Lakers like going on a really long win streak and the starting group being like, okay, because then you're like, you can't really justify the results in either direction of like, you're still winning and the group is like good enough, but not really like elite. Like you want an elite starting group. I don't, there are of course exceptions, but most teams that win the title or are true like conference finalists, you have your 5 guys, that unit plays a lot together and it's usually a pretty good unit. And I just don't, this unit will be better. This will probably be the worst this unit will ever be. So I think it'll be a positive unit overall. My just thing is, I think they're going to be very susceptible to really rough defensive lapses. And, they need an attention to detail that it's just really difficult to have every single night. But this group cannot coast on the defensive end. If they coast on the defensive end, you see what has happened. Like they will give up these runs that are just really difficult to like. Now they have to dig themselves out of a hole, and that's partly. It does feel like sometimes they start games defensively, at least in cruise control. Then they get beat up a little bit, and then they're finally like, all right, let's put our foot on the gas defensively. Whereas like I think having Marcus out there, you just saw immediately. I think in both halves when Marcus came out there was an immediate shift defensively, and no. I don't think he's like the salve or the save where they're going to be a top 10 defense, but he could be the difference between like the 17th defense and the 23rd defense. I think that is possible. So we'll see. But I don't think Rui has to go. I think if they're going to use him as a wing stopper and a 30+ minute a night permanently guy, that's where I start to entertain that. Like I think he can have an effective role off the bench and do a lot of like what Jake LaRavia did tonight, but at like every night getting 12, 14, 16 off the bench. As a starter, I think there's a real limitation there. What does it matter, bro? Thank you for the super chat. Also, Gabe Vincent and Dalton for Terrence Mann in a second. Contracts line up. That is an interesting one. Terrence, I believe, has 2 more years left. 1 more year left. He has 2 more years left. So he's 15.5 this year, 15.5 next year, 16 the following year. I I like Terrence Mann. I don't love that contract, to be completely honest. Like, that is more than mid-level money. And let's see. I mean, he's shooting 38% on threes. He's always been a low volume 3-point shooter, but has largely been an above average 3-point shooter for his career. 2-point percentage has been trending the wrong way for multiple years. He's averaging 10, 3, and 3. I don't know. I don't view him as like the perfect fifth starter. I view him as a really good bench player. Now, based on the price, you're not giving up any draft capital. I don't know. To be clear, I don't know. Like, so I guess for Brooklyn, you're getting off of the man contract and you're getting DK as a potential rotation piece longer term. I don't know that they'd give up a second, but maybe. I mean, that they have some assets to move. That's an interesting one. I'll be honest, I don't love Mann's contract at 15.5 and 16 the following year. It's not like bad, but it's probably a little rich in my opinion. Like, he's probably more of a $10 to $12 million player in my opinion, but I don't know. That's an interesting one. I would have to if I'm both sides, I have to think about it. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. The next LA versus OKC game is February 10th, 2026. When is the trade deadline for the season? Assuming we have a full roster, it's February 6th. Assuming we have full roster against OKC after that game, front office would definitely know if this team needs a trade or two. Unfortunately, it's February 6th. It is before the, I forget, it's 6th or 7th, but it's before the 10th. I believe it's the 6th. No, 5th. Sorry. It is Thursday the 5th at 3 p.m. Eastern. So even earlier. So yeah, it's February 5th. Jay Spares, thank you for the super chat. Sapien, the team bench and LeBron had a smile ear to ear after that second dish to DA. Looked like a kid who got a new toy at Christmas. This duo is going to be scary. Coaching staff very focused on DA. I think they've done well. I'm glad you were at the game and had such great seats. Wish we got a chance to meet up or say what's up, but next time, and you know, I believe you're in New York, so I'll be out there for the Knicks and Nets games, and definitely have to do a meetup then. But yeah, I mean, LeBron DA, the duo looked great to start their tenure together, and I think Lakers leaning into Ayton as this lion, and you know, for some people it might be a little cheesy or corny, and I get it, but like, that stuff matters when you feel supported and when you feel like there's a buy-in from the organization and the coaching staff and the people who are in charge. And especially for Ayton, basically being like kicked out in Phoenix and Portland, having back-to-back situations where teams, for lack of a better term, gave up on you and blatantly gave up on you. And like, you've been a bit of a laughingstock and a punching bag for the last couple, few years. I think having a team that's like supporting you and rallying around you and building you up, lifting you up, like I think that is invaluable. And I think that's part of why we've seen largely the best version of DeAndre. And, of course, his contract year that's going to factor in as well. But I think the Lakers have done a really good job of locking into him in the right way and supporting him. And Chrissy13, thank you for the super chat. With Derek, I think the Clippers only move him in a 3-team deal using the Lakers piece. Any realistic 3-and-D guys you like? I feel like we could be legit championship contenders, just need athletic wings. That could be true. The Lakers could pull a Luka trade and not let Utah know what was going on. And Utah's like, yeah, we'll take JHS. Oh, shit. We just helped the Lakers get Luka. We were not anticipating this. I mean, 3-and-D is like the amount of guys that actually check the box. Like, you want someone who can do both to some degree, right? Like, some guys are going to be a slightly below average shooter, but like an elite defender. Some guys are going to be an elite shooter, an average-ish defender. I mean, technically every player is like a 3-and-D player, right? Because outside of like centers, pretty much every 1 through 4, most players in a rotation are shooting threes, and then everybody has to play defense, right? But of course, like taking the definition more seriously, I think that the guys that I've talked about to varying degrees are like Herb Jones, Andrew Wiggins, Dylan Brooks. Then you could go down, I think, to like the Derek Jones Jr. type. I don't think he's quite on the level of those three, but in whatever next tier you want. And then, I mean, there's like, guys I like who I view as more bench players, like a Royce O'Neal or a Matisse Thybulle or some of those types of guys where Ochai Agbaji, like, I like those guys. I just don't. I think they're probably a little over their skis as like starting guys, especially when you're looking at like the way I'm looking at the Lakers moving forward, and the way I've tried to look at them up to this point is you're playing Denver. There's 5 minutes left. You're playing OKC. There's 5 minutes left. You're playing Houston. There's 5 minutes left. Can this player be on the floor and hold their own, and ideally not even hold their own, but like potentially win the matchup? And when you think about like Jokic and Gordon and Johnson and Brown and Murray, those are like, Johnson has had a rough start to the season, but he just had a big game against Chicago. He's trending back up. Those are like 5 really solid players. Then you get to OKC, and I don't even want to name 5 because they could go in a multitude of ways. Of they could go to 2 big, they could go to 1 big, they could go bigless, like they could do whatever they want. And then even Houston, they could go 2 big, they could go 1 big. They're giant and long. So I'm like, basically everyone I'm looking at through that lens of can you be on the floor against that caliber of team, and can you at least hold your own, if not potentially win your individual matchup? And that's where like the tier of like, to be complete, like a Royce O'Neal, I don't think belongs on the floor against OKC or against Denver or against Houston in the final 5 minutes in like the conference semifinals or finals, right? I think even Matisse Thybulle to me is more of a bench guy. Agbaji is a bit of a wild card. Like maybe he can, but probably more of a bench guy. I think Brooks, Wiggins, and Herb Jones are all guys who can. And if you told me Andrew Wiggins outplayed Cam Johnson in a game, I wouldn't be like surprised by that, right? You could say the same thing about Rui, but I do have more confidence in Wiggins, and he's a much better defender than Rui. So your floor, at least on that end, is a bit higher. So yeah, I mean, I think if there's a way to get one guy plus Derek Jones, that would be like the ideal scenario, and have Derek come off the bench. But I just, again, I'm a little skeptical the Clippers are going to sign off on that. Then we got a couple here from Gary Singh. Feel like the Lakers should take off the next 2 days. Apparently they'll be practicing on Thursday. I think they need to recover from minor injuries. I'm glad you mentioned this because the other, like, there's a moment there. I thought Luka messed up his knee. I think you guys will remember the play, but Luka, I'm forgetting who threw it. It might have been Austin, but I don't remember off the top of my head. Someone threw a lob to Luka, which in and of itself was a little bit like, why are you like, all right, dude's dunked a couple times, but like a lob is a little presumptive with Luka in transition. But then Keontae George blocks the lob, tips it out, and lands and falls back into Luka's knee. And for like 5 seconds there, I was like, oh my God, Luka just like tore something, or he just like, it was honestly kind of similar to the Derek Jones play. Like I think the Derek Jones, you saw his knee go a certain way that it was obviously more severe, but for 5 seconds, I was like, the Lakers just, that's the last thing they need right now is they get LeBron back, then Luka gets injured. So I think them taking off Wednesday is a smart move. JJ said they're going to practice Thursday. They're going to do some team activity Friday. So it sounds like they might partly take off Friday in terms of like practicing, but it'll be more of a team outing. And then Saturday will be practice, and then they will fly out to Utah Saturday afternoon. So yeah, I mean, definitely like, I wouldn't be surprised if Luka is a limited participant at some, like, at least in Thursday's practice, based on you're running on adrenaline. Like you don't know what that injury is. It's obviously not serious. He was able to play on it for the rest of the game, but there was a moment there I was like, wow, like this just changed the Lakers season. Gary Singh, thank you for the super chat. Second one, opposing star players will get into rhythm too easy against our current starting defense. Lakers ceiling depends on role players making open shots. That's a really good point too. And I'm glad you made it in terms of like how you start the game and whatnot. Like Keontae George and Lauri Markkanen got into very quick rhythms, and it was in part due to Lakers' mistakes, but also them being able to pick on certain guys defensively. And again, I think it would be like, I don't want to miscast miscast too much onto Marcus in terms of, I don't think he's not the defensive player of the year, Marcus, that he was with the Celtics, right? But everything is on a relative scale on an NBA team to some degree. And I think based on, especially if like these are the 9, right? Like if Vando really is out of the rotation, or at most like a 1 to 2 shift player who's probably playing 8-10 minutes a night tops, then Marcus is the best defender in the top 9, or at least the best perimeter defender, depending, but I think best defender. So again, like relatively, he's not a Lou Dort. I mean, I think OKC probably has multiple perimeter guys who are better defenders than Marcus, but for what the Lakers have, and this is why they probably need to make a trade, but for what they have, like, he checks that box the most out of anybody that's at least in the primary rotation. So that is where, like, having him on a Keontae, on a Lauri, like, I thought he actually defended Lauri pretty well when again, they would do actions to get him off of Lauri, but when he was on him, he was pushing up on him and being physical with him and not letting him get to his spots. So I think the Lakers need more players who in general make opponents uncomfortable. And really the only 2 guys who I think consistently do that are Marcus and Vando. Jake to a lesser degree, but mainly Marcus and Vando. And Vando's just not in the rotation right now. So if you have one guy who does that, yeah, I think that guy probably should start and probably should play more than 17 minutes. But you know, I'm not. Again, I'm not making the decision on that. Then what does it matter, bro? Thank you for the super chat. You think Sack could be greased into Murray Ellis deals since 1, Murray injured, 2, Ellis stuck the bench for some reason. The first, that's my dream. Would definitely need to give up the first. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Keon Ellis has been moved into the starting group. I'm checking their last game. Yeah, Keon, the ESPN box scores are I just really don't like these. He started, but he only played 15 minutes. And looking at his game logs, yeah, he's been very 15, 22, 31, 14, 12, 12, 17, 25, 16. I think Keon is probably going to be gettable at some point. I would assume. I mean, it was funny. For those who listened to the Low Post, he had Zach had a nice segment on the Kings and Keon and how talking to other teams, they're like, did he steal someone's sandwich or something? Like, why is this? He's like clearly their best 2-way player, and for whatever, because they got the names of Levine and DeRozan and Westbrook and Schroeder, like he's behind all these guys that he's a better 2-way player than, and it just doesn't really make sense. I mean, maybe I think that the Kings, so to compare the Kings situation to the Clippers situation, the Kings actually have their own pick, and it would make some sense for them to tank. Now, Vivek has not been wired that way, and he does seem to have some grand illusions of this team doing something. So I think the Clippers are desperate team number 1. Kings could be desperate team number 2. It does seem like they are trending more toward just a fire sale. Let's tear it down. But I think the guys they're going to try and get off of are the bigger contracts first and foremost. So for Murray Ellis, you could just do Dalton. But Murray with the new extension, that's the other thing. I believe he is trade eligible still. No, according to Spot Track, he can't be traded till July 1st of next year. So I just remembered that as I was thinking about this. So this year he's making 11.14, but then next year it kicks up to 24.1. So according to Spot Track, which is in my opinion, the best cap site, contract site in the game. They say he has a trade restriction through July 1st because of the extension. And it gets tricky because like Gafford signed the extension, but then Gafford, like it depends on the raise and what the rate is. And like it gets a little complicated, but according to them, Keegan Murray cannot be traded. Thomas, I think Keon is a Patrick Beverley type of defender where he actually looks much better on defense than he actually is outside of Russ, Dennis, and Keon. Their defense is horrible. I don't think now is the time to compare anybody to Pat Beverley, but I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, I thought he got cooked I thought Austin cooked him when they were matched up in that game in Sacramento at the beginning of the season. But I mean, I think he's solid. Again, to me, he's probably like thinking through the lens of OKC, Denver, Houston. I think he's probably more of a bench player in that matchup, but you are getting, well, in the theoretical trade we were just discussing, you're also getting Murray. I would like Keon Ellis as like a second wing guy and not really the primary guy, but I think he has a lot of untapped potential, and factoring in the 3-point shooting and the off-ball play. He's also like, I feel like he's also one of those guys who I feel like when he's out there, he looks more like he's like 6'3" or 6'4", but he's actually listed at, I believe, depending on the site, 6'5" or 6'6". So he does play like maybe a little bit smaller than he actually is, but he is a legit, like he's basically Austin size. BC asks what happened to Pat Bev. You should look it up on Google. I'm not going to get into it, but it is very, very serious and very, just not a good situation. Chucko Thunder, Keon for Gabe is an upgrade. Oh yeah, for sure. If nothing else, just because of the size, honestly, like I'm a big believer in, it's just really hard in the modern NBA to be like under 6'4" unless you're an elite like Davion Mitchell type defender, which I think Gabe's a solid to good defender depending on the night, depending on the matchup, but he's not Davion Mitchell. And then, or unless you're like a Jalen Brunson, Darius Garland, type, but that's not Gabe either. So this year, Keon shooting 44% on 4 threes a game. So that's actually that's similar to Rui volume, lower number. But yeah, I think Keon is a straight up better defender than Gabe. He's also bigger and he's a better shooter and a more reliable shooter. So yeah, I mean, if there's any way to do Dalton plus a second, I would do that in a heartbeat. All right, going to go 5 more minutes. I'm going to wait for the 5 more minute stickers to load. And then Three-peat leak says Gabe is not solid to good, man. Get out of here. I'm not saying overall. I'm saying I think as a point of attack defender. Now, there are real limitations to him switching onto people. Like that has been my biggest gripe with Gabe in particular, is that the Lakers will allow him to switch onto Kevin Durant and Lauri Markkanen and some of these guys he should never be switched onto. And they will just let him die on a hill there solo. I think as a point of attack guy, he is solid to good. When you factor in the poor rebounding, and he's also he's been a solid charge guy for most of his career. But when you factor in the rim protection, just the size limitations, which affect rim protection, affect rebounding, affect overall just contesting and like being a nuisance, that lowers him. So I guess I will. When I've been talking about him defensively, I'm largely talking about him in his ideal role of just being like a point of attack guy on ideally second unit guys. Like he should be a backup guard guarding backup guards. I think he is largely solid to good in that specific role. When you factor in his overall defense, you're probably right in that it trends closer to average. I do think Gabe makes winning plays. My bigger gripe with Gabe is the shot selection, and I think he has a little bit too green of a light within the Lakers system, and it's fine on a night like tonight when he hits a couple threes, but we've seen the nights where he goes 0 for 6, 0 for 7, and it's just a little bit too much. So, yeah. G, 6 double-digit wins already this year, and 3 of them are right now in terms of the 3-game win streak. So, yeah, Lakers are playing their best basketball of the season right now. BC notes that Gabe's career field goal percentage is under 40%. To be clear, I was talking about Gabe defensively, not overall. I have much more of an issue with him offensively than defensively. Jake from State Farm, do you need more super chats, Buha, to buy more hair products? You know, the holidays coming up, and yeah, I guess. Nah. I mean, of course, I always welcome super chats, but not for the hair products. Jay says Gabe's like 5'11". I would say he's probably 6'2" in shoes. So yeah, maybe 6'1" without shoes, 6'2" in shoes. Cage Britt, Jovan, in the small sample size we've gotten, how comfortable are you with Hayes being our primary backup big? I'm relatively comfortable. I still think that, and you know, it's not apples to apples per se, but like if we compare, it's especially not apples because of 2 of these 3 teams start 2 centers, but in specifically thinking about, again, the standard that I'm trying to hold the Lakers to in terms of how do they match up with, up to this point, the 3 best teams in the West, and what I project, I projected going to the season, and have up to this point in the season been the 3 best teams in the West. OKC, Denver, and Houston. I like imagining him matching up with Isaiah Hartenstein or Jonas Valanciunas or Steven Adams. It's like he's going to get pushed around. There's no real way about it. And even tonight, I thought there were some possessions where Yusuf Nurkic pushed him around, and Nurkic is, I mean, Nurkic almost single-handedly passed the Jazz out of the game. He had 6 turnovers, and most of them were like pick 6 types where it was just, I would guess at least 4 of those 6 were direct steals from the Lakers where Nurkic just did a ridiculous pass. And then he had a couple he threw out of bounds. But point being, like, in general, I think Jackson has played well. I've talked about, I would give him probably a B or B plus grade. I think tonight was in line with those performances. I still think even though he has bulked up and been better as an interior presence, I still think in 9 out of 10 times he's getting pushed around by all 3 Steven Adams pushes everybody around. So I don't want to hold him to the standard of like, can you not get pushed around by Steven Adams? But even like a Hartenstein and a Valanciunas, I think those guys easily move him. And that is still my primary concern with Jackson is like, I think he's stabilized in terms of some of his rough patches of the fouls and like the crash outs. But I do think there are certain teams and matchups that are just like big groups that test you on the defensive glass. And that is still one of the weaker parts of his game. He's a below average rebounder for a 7-footer. So, and he's on the slender side, even with the body transformation. So I I would like a different pitch. And I don't even know if that's Maxi. Like, Maxi, I think, takes some hard fouls. I feel like he did bulk up a little bit in the offseason. He looks a little bit bigger, but he's also not that type of big. Ayton's honestly not really that type of big either. Like, I think he would hold up the best of the three, but I would like a little bit more of like a defensive bruiser type, and or just like I think a Gafford is probably like, and that's of course a luxury to have a Gafford as like your backup, but I think that's a guy who's a bit bigger, a bit heavier, and I think physically on paper should hold up better than any of the other current options, but I don't see Dallas just handing Gafford to LA. So I guess in summation, yes, I would ideally like them to have a different pitch and a more physical pitch, but might just not be in the cards with the current group. Bashir, Vando plus a second for Jonathan Isaac, 2 negative contracts, but Isaac's non-guaranteed. I mean, that fact alone makes Isaac less of a negative contract, right? So if there's a factor that makes one of them less negative, that's where. But to your point, he's got one. So next year, he's got 4.5, 14.5, 14.5, 15. But next year, only 8 is guaranteed. I mean, yeah, sure. I would rather just have Isaac than Vando straight up, although he does come with some extensive injury history, right? But I don't think Orlando does that. Like, Isaac's been will close games for them. I don't see Vando doing that. Thank Charlie. Thank you for the super chat. Subrate, Return of the King was today. LOL. Is there any chance of us doing a little pod within the next week or so? Please let me know by email. Thank you. To be honest, it's going to be pretty tough. I'm booked through the week and definitely won't be able to do next week. But I would say we'll have to find a time, likely in December. The Reeves, strongest soldier. What have you thought of Ayton defensively? I think he's been good, but his closeout limitations hurt with Rui out there, or if LeBron, if he won't hard recover. Yeah. So I'm probably a little lower than consensus on Ayton's defense. I think that he's one of those guys where, like, when he just has to make like a simple rotation and just be big and contest, like there's a play in transition. I want to say, I think Keontae George tried to challenge him in transition. Ayton, 7-footer, 9 foot, whatever standing reach, jumps up, athletic, blocks it out of bounds. Good defensive play. But I think I did blame or say, in my opinion, most of the blame was on LeBron and Rui in that beginning stretch, but Ayton was not Ayton was a part of it too, specifically in one of his big issues defensively, in my opinion, and JJ has called this out, so I'm not alone in this thinking, is for whatever reason, he's always lower than he should be in screening situations defensively. So there were several times in the game tonight where he just needs to be higher and up to touch, and he's just a step or two. I don't think it's like slow. I think he's just like more of his natural preference is to be in a little bit of a drop, but against certain shooters and certain players, you can't be that low. Otherwise it's death. And I even thought like there were some shots they got that were high quality shots that they just missed, that you're fortunate that they missed, but like again, I'll continue to harp on like process over results, and the process there was not good. So I think he was better in the second half than he was in the first half. But I think when the Lakers go on those stretches of like really bad defense, that is like often his thing, is that he's just kind of not playing aggressively on the perimeter. And it's frustrating because he can do that. We've seen him switch on to that's almost the thing, is like when he switches onto a guy and he's like in isolation, he actually can leverage his size and athleticism and length and like poke the ball away or contest well or whatever. It's more so the quick dribble handoff or pick and roll situation and he has to make a quick read, he's often a little bit too low. So I'd like to see that change. And then I also think there are times where if a guy gets a step on him, he can struggle to recover, and it will often be some sort of like, I feel like there's a lot of like back cuts or someone beats him and then it's just kind of like a layup, where I would like to see him have a stronger contest or maybe even foul them. Like honestly, pull up Maxi Kleber was out there throwing some elbows in Milwaukee. Like I think that's the way you have to defend the paint sometimes. Bans Day'Ron Sharpe from the Nets. They apparently were not, or I reported this, that they did not ask about him in the DFS trade. So I don't know. I mean, I'd be open to him, and he does fit that physical. I think he's better than Jackson, and I think he checks the physical box. So if there's a way to do it, yeah. But again, I think I'm not at the point where I think anything clearly better than Jackson is like a luxury. I think it's more so, could you find a way to have like another just alternative that maybe, like, there are some I think Jackson makes more sense in like a Golden State matchup, right? For example, where you have to leverage that's more of a speed, athleticism type of matchup. Whereas some of these other matchups against some of the top teams, and you could even throw in Wemby, once he's back from his injury, like that's where it's more of in the trenches and it's more about size and physicality and strength. All right. I am John Paul, Jovan, every Lakers player can't defend. Don't know if you're quoting me saying that. I don't think that. I think I would say Marcus Smart, Jake LaRavia, and Jared Vanderbilt have been all clear positives on the defensive end. I think they've all been plus defenders. I think Jackson and Ayton have been solid in their roles. I would say they've been above average and probably exceeded my expectations entering the season. I think Austin has been a bit up and down, but I think that's to be expected to a degree based on his increase in offensive usage, and he's playing a career high in minutes, career high in usage. That is physically taxing. And I think Luka has also been like, I think everyone's actually kind of playing to, like, Luka's been really good with the steals, the defensive playmaking, even on the ball. I think has been better than last year. So I guess I would say I think Rui's been worse than last year. I think Rui has been regressed a little bit. Gabe, I just think it is a bit limited based on the size, but I think everyone has largely been like bought in and done what they needed to. I just think there's ultimate, like, someone can be doing a good job or a solid job and still it's not good enough, right? Like, because again, I was just talking about OKC. I think they probably have 4 to 5 defenders that are better than any single defender on the Lakers. Like that's the gap there, right? So that's the gap that the Lakers have to try and close. Jeremy notes Sharp is 6'8". Yeah, but he's like 260, 265. He'd be the heaviest, might be the heaviest Laker or non-LeBron Laker. He's a bulldozer. Thomas, thoughts on Bobby Portis? Depends on the price. Like, I think he's a big part of what Milwaukee does. So I don't know that Milwaukee is in win now mode. Depending on the price, I would be open to it. But for me, he's always been a guy who's he's kind of like Rui as like a center, like good shooter, could be a good bench player, good scorer, but there's a bit of a defensive limitation there I think is actually probably more problematic at like the 5 spot. Then Michael D, I will close with this one. Luka took a beating this game. Did you see the huge mark on his face after the big collision? Also, my heart effing dropped when I saw the lob replay. Yeah, I talked about the lob replay a bit ago, probably 20, 30 minutes ago. So you might have missed that. But I thought he like tore his MCL or something. Like I thought it was done. Or at least like the DJJ situation where he's out for multiple weeks. Yeah, I mean he took a real beating, and that's it's been nothing easy for Luka this year in terms of like he's just I feel like he always is like fourth quarter disheveled, and he just like I feel like it's him and Jokic and a couple other guys where they just look like they got jumped by the other 5 players at the end of every game, and they're bleeding and they have all these random scratches and smacks and different things. But yeah, I mean, Luka, I mean, that's how you get to the free throw line 16 times. And I feel like people, I see the online discourse and people go at the grifting or the foul shooting or whatever, but it's like, no, he's, there will occasionally be a foul that he sells and that is part of the game, but he's in the trenches and he's getting smacked and hammered by opposing defenses. And the second he exposes the ball, they try to strip it or block it, and they end up smacking his arm. And then he's got the marks. So appreciate you all though. I'm going to wrap here. I went a little bit over, but at this point, it's basically a 2-hour show. I appreciate you all, though, for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific time with Beyond the Block. Big Waz will be on, and we'll be talking about 2 takes that we each were right about to start the season and 2 takes that we each were wrong about. So I have no idea what his takes are going to be. Excited to see what he says. But shout out to the Late Night Gang. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Appreciate you all. Jay asks, not sure how the score changed. So the score... one scoreboard said 126, one said 125. They announced it on the scoreboard as 125. ESPN had it at 125, so I tweeted out 125. Then it ended up being 126. So I'm guessing there was some free throw or something that changed it late, but it was, I don't know. It was odd, but appreciate you all. Big win for the Lakers, 11-4 at the 15-game mark. It's about as good of a start to the season as realistically possible. And LeBron came back and looked like, I think, a missing piece in the offense that is going to elevate it to an entirely different level. But appreciate you all, and we'll talk to you all tomorrow.